How long have I been walking now? My feet were on fire. Now they're just numb. I wish I were dreaming, but I know that I'm not. It's a dark, moonless night, and my body is walking on its own through the thick brush of a forest. There are cuts from brambles and thorns all over my body. It's too dark to see my feet, but I'm pretty sure they're bleeding. There's a voice ringing in my head that I can't quite hear. I know it's the vampires. I know it's Pharaoh calling me to him. I know where I'm going, back to his manor, and there it is through the trees. A dull glow pouring through its upper windows, and there's Pharaoh watching me from the second floor, anticipating my arrival. The side door of the manor opens before me, and I proceed into the basement. I follow an unfamiliar route to the same narrow hall. A door opens just across from the room with the hanging sheep, and I enter a small stone cellar outfitted with coffins. The door of a standing coffin on the left opens, and I climb inside. It closes over me, leaving me in blackness, and for a moment there's no sound until soft footsteps creep up the hall. I can feel Pharaoh, my master, standing just on the other side of this coffin door. "Mathew, my dear pet," he started, voice ringing in my head. "Get some rest. I will have need of your services in the morning." I listened to his footsteps move away, and somehow managed to fall asleep standing up. Again as I slept, I was full of nightmares, and when I awoke, I could still feel the lumps under my skin, spiders crawling around the inside of my body. They dissipated after 5 seconds, retreating from my surface into some lower region. My coffin door creaked open, and Pharaoh was already standing before me, just in the entrance of the cellar. "Mathew, today I'll need you to attend to the livestock. Just behind my manor there is a pasture for sheep, and a lake behind it. The lake water is rich in minerals, and I like to give it to the sheep to drink. Fetch a bucket and bring some of that lake water to the sheep. Shear them and feed them. Clean their pen. Then return here, and I'll give you another task." I did as I was bid, and marched out to the pasture behind the house, toting a steel bucket. The lake behind the manor was so clear, it was actually beautiful. The bulb on top of the manor that Pharaoh used to generate storms was not in operation. I wondered why. I collected a bucket of the crystal clear water and brought it back towards the sheep pen. At that moment, it seemed that I was allowed control over my own body. I poured the water bucket into a trough, fed the sheep, sheared them, and cleaned out their pen. When my task was done, I looked over at the manor. Lightning streaked out of the brass bulb on the roof and into the sky. Dark clouds swirled overhead. Pharaoh had started up the device that created storms. But why? I could see him in the kitchen. Or wait, that wasn't him. It was the girl with the brown ponytail. She was standing right beside the window to the courtyard, and right beside her, the black shadow that had been following her in my nightmares previously. I gasped and blinked, and they were gone, as was the storm. It was a beautiful, clear day. I looked around. There was no sign that Pharaoh was nearby, or paying attention to what I was doing. I turned from the manor 180 degrees and stared longingly into the forest beyond. I made a break for it, walking at first at a brisk pace, then jogging, then sprinting. A burning feeling appeared inside my chest that started as a little flame and became a roaring fire. I screamed and doubled over onto the ground. Lumps were traveling every which way under my skin as the spiders writhed within me. I could hear Pharaoh's stern voice in my head, but I couldn't make out the words he was saying. After a time, my body picked itself up and carried itself itself back into the basement. The door to the cellar room I had slept in opened, and I found myself autonomously lying face down on the cold stone floor. The soft patter of Pharaoh's footsteps came down the hall, and he entered the room. I was lifted into the air by an invisible force and turned to face him. "You really tried to escape me, my pet. Such a pity. I'll teach you not to try that again." Still suspended in the air, I was thrown back into my coffin and the lid slammed shut. White spiders bubbled up under my skin and poured out of me, tearing through, climbing across every organ inside me and biting them. The suffering was unimaginable, and I screamed and screamed for hours. When my torment was over, Pharaoh appeared once more with another task for me. "Mathew, my pet, I hope that hurt. Go clean out the guest room for me, would you? It's awfully dusty in there, wouldn't you say?" With each passing moment, I was becoming more and more terrified of Pharaoh and the power he had over me. He was maintaining his old man form, but I could see an evil behind his eyes that I don't know how I ever missed previously. I resented him deeply, but I was almost afraid to even think such thoughts. I climbed the stairs in the front foyer to the second floor and spent the better part of the afternoon thoroughly dusting and clearing out cobwebs. When, to my surprise, there came a knock on the front door. I looked outside into the courtyard to see that it was raining. The thunderstorm generator had switched on. I made my way out of the guest room and onto the mezzanine to observe. The front door clicked open. It was the woman with the brown ponytail, and this time I wasn't hallucinating, but it still wasn't as she had appeared in my dream. Pharaoh greeted her at the door, and they were conversing. He seized control of my body again, and I found myself autonomously backstepping into the guest room and shutting the door behind me. He didn't want her to see me, evidently. Listening through the door, I caught a brief moment of their conversation. Her car had broken down after lightning struck a tree that landed on it. My heart sank. She was prey, just as I was, or at least, she was soon to be. My body started moving on its own again, moving toward the front-facing window. I opened it and began climbing down the ivy on the front face of the manor. My body walked around the side of the house, entered the side door, and then made its way into the basement. I was locked in my coffin, hands folded neatly over my chest. I could feel soothing whispers in my head, beguiling me into sleep. But try as Pharaoh might to keep me out of his way, my nightmares awoke me at a time when I was not supposed to be awakened. I could feel the absence of him. He wasn't paying attention to me. In fact, he wasn't even in his human form. I could feel him throughout the upper floors of the manor, dispersed in a cloud of spiders, moving around the guest room, observing it. He had not yet taken that girl's blood. The spiders fled from their perches and made their way over to the library, where they coalesced and formed the man. He would observe her from out that stormy window, just as he did me. I knew what I had to do. I could not let that girl fall asleep. I could not let her share my fate. I knew the manor well enough by now. I was situated directly below her. My coffin door swung open, not being held closed by any invisible forces. I looked up and around on the ceiling to see a small vent shaft, then down to the ground, where small stones had broken off of some of the cobbles of the cellar floor. I picked one up and hurled it into the vent. It echoed hauntingly up to the second floor, and I heard a feminine gasp in the vent make its way down. Good. If I can keep her scared, she won't fall asleep. I retired into my coffin for another 30 minutes or so, and then repeated the process, with a handful of stones this time. Again, sounds of alarm made their way down to me in the basement, followed by the sound of footsteps. She had risen from her bed, and Pharaoh was still perched in his library. I repeated this until morning came, and Pharaoh had no opportunity to make a move. Fleeting shafts of light poured down the vent, and for the moment no thunder rumbled through the walls. Brisk footsteps shuffled out of the room above me. The girl was making a break for it. I made my way down the long hall to the staircase that led to the foyer, then climbed up the stairs to the mezzanine and into the guest room to confirm. Her sheets were awry and the window was closed, but out of it I could see her making her way down the road. In a great fury, a swarm of white spiders followed her out the door. The storm generator started up again, and hefty clouds blocked out the light of the sun. I couldn't see the spiders with my eyes, but I knew where they were. When I closed my eyes, I could see them as a shadow. That's it. The shadow is Pharaoh after all. That's how he appears when he isn't in his human form. But why a shadow? And why were the spiders so pale? Could it be that all those legends and folk tales about vampires are true? I climbed out the guest room window once again and made my way up the ivy onto the roof. The girl with the brown ponytail was circling back to the house, too afraid of the thunderstorm to take her chances, and still never having seen Pharaoh in his elder vampire form. Lightning and sheets of rain crashed down around me as I made my way over the manor's roof. I had to get to that generator. The girl with the brown ponytail had already made her way back to the front door, however. I needed to go quicker. I could hear her beneath me, calling hello into the empty foyer and climbing the stairs. It was just as it had been in my nightmare. Pharaoh's shadow followed close behind her. Up the stairs he crept as she hung her coat over the banister and made her way deeper into the mezzanine. As I approached the storm generator, I could see that the ball was in fact floating, suspended in midair. Visible electricity ran between it and a massive copper socket that held it in place. I didn't know what would work, but I had to try something. I ripped shingles off the roof and tossed them into the space between the ball and its socket. The lightning was so loud it was tearing my eardrums apart. I felt the shadow beneath me enter the kitchen at the top of the stairs and could see in through a small hole in the ceiling that the girl was eating her venison. She likely aimed to pretend that she'd never left the manor. I could tell that what I was doing was working. As shingles piled up in the space between the floating copper orb and its socket, electricity snapped and fizzed and smoked, and the orb had lost some of its height. At last, just in time, I reached the critical threshold. The socket had been completely insulated, and electricity neither left nor entered the bulb. An explosion sent me flying, and the storm dissipated instantly. The stained glass windows of the kitchen shattered, and a horrible moaning erupted below. I slid down the slick roof and landed flat on my back in the courtyard, winded, gasping for breath, surprised to still be living. Daylight poured in, and the elder vampire was melting, burning away in a lot more than the candlelight. The girl with the ponytail was clutching her hands to her face. I could feel Pharaoh's pain. I screamed with him as my curdled blood burned and the spiders were purged from my body. But at last, I caught my breath. No longer something other than human. I lay in the peace of the courtyard and smiled. Hey guys, hope you liked that story. Thought I'd give it a happy ending for once. If you like my stories, you should check out my book, Polyandrian: Becoming the King of Hell. It's available on Amazon right now, but I'll probably put it up in more places in the future. It's about a little boy who dies and then grows up in hell, but he has a chance at living again if he kills certain powerful demons. And sorry my voice is kind of scratchy in this video. I was doing a lot of yelling recording the audiobook for it. I'm still working on that, but it'll be like a month until that's out probably. I'm trying to become a writer, so I really appreciate if you share these videos, even that you watch these videos, and also if you check out my book, that would help me out a lot. Until next time, embrace the beautiful dark.